Kareem Rae, your host at the One Soccer Nation podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing Matt Rizzetta. Matt, can you please introduce yourself to our audience?
Kareem, first off, thanks for having me on the program. Congrats on all the great work. It's a pleasure and an honor to be with you. My name is Matt Rizzetta. I'm the founder and chairman of North Six Group. So we're a family office operating company. We're based in New York. We have three main subsidiaries. We have a media and marketing subsidiary, which consists of a bunch of different agencies that I founded along with some of my partners, including Morgan Harris, who's one of my main partners out in California. We have a venture capital subsidiary, and we have a sports and entertainment subsidiary called Club Underdog. That's obviously what we're here to talk about. We have right now 5 assets under management for professional soccer franchises: Campobasso in Italy, Dagenham and Redbridge, Daggers in England, Brooklyn Football Club, which is 2 franchises. We have both a men's and women's franchise, both playing under the Brooklyn Football Club umbrella. And then we own a stake in a fast-growing soccer apparel company called Diizza. So that's the latest and greatest, and super excited about what we're building over at Club Underdog.
Amazing. So much to discuss about. Matt, again, I know I've said it so many times before, but thank you again so much for taking the time. One of my favorite questions to ask is, how'd you get involved in the beautiful game?
Well, I grew up, Kareem, I grew up about 20 or so miles north of New York City, attached really to my grandparents, my grandfather in particular, who was a soccer player in Italy and then kind of gave up his dream to come here to the United States, like so many other immigrants did, and made a ton of sacrifices. And for my family, and I grew up really, spending a lot of time with him Sunday mornings watching Serie A. That was back in the heyday of the golden age of Italian football with, Maradona's Napoli teams and Van Basten and AC Milan and Juventus and Platini and all those guys. And it was really a big part of my childhood. And then fast forward, obviously, several decades later, when I got my career kickstarted and built my business, one of my big dreams and goals and aspirations was to build the business to a point where I could afford to take some chances and take some risks and go buy an ownership interest in a professional Italian soccer team, particularly from an area where my grandparents immigrated from. And we wound up doing that. Obviously, several decades later, we wound up buying a minority interest in Campobasso. Now we own a majority stake, the controlling stake of Campobasso, as well as our other teams. But that's really how it all got started.
That's amazing. Italy's kind of close home to me. I have cousins that are half Italian, half Egyptian, and I grew up playing in Woodbridge, where the majority is Italian, and I love Italian food. So, you know, and I know you're invested both in Italy and the United States. They're two completely different beasts, but why did you start off in investing in Italy first? Like, I mean, wouldn't you want to start in the US and then go to Italy? But it was a bit different. You started off in Europe.
Yeah, well, Kareem, originally, obviously, our model now has changed, and it's considerably bigger, larger enterprise, our soccer portfolio, than it was when I first started. But when I first started, it was really my love and passion for Italian football and Italian culture and family and the language that brought me to it. So that was my main motivation. It gave me an excuse to spend a little bit more time in Italy and to get over there 5 or 6 times a year and learn the inner workings of how, what it takes to operate a club. I was really enamored with the European football model, promotion and relegation and all that stuff. So that's really what motivated me at first to get involved with Italy. Then obviously from Italy, we wound up getting involved in US soccer, and Brooklyn Football Club was sort of born out of all that. But originally it was just my passion and my really frankly an opportunity to invest in something that conjured up such great images and memories from my childhood that brought me to it. And Italy was really the place to do it first.
That's amazing. Was it a straightforward process in getting in that investment, or was it there was a little bit of navigating to do?
Oh no, it was a pretty exhaustive process, Kareem. We spent about a year before we invested in Campobasso and the Italian team. We looked at about, first off, there was so much private equity money at the time going into European football. Originally started in England, and then at that time, this is like 2019 into 2020, the private equity investors started to started to do deals in Italy. But the thing that I sort of noticed was that all of them were doing deals in the north, in cities like Venice and Milan and Florence and the more touristy destinations in the, the affluent, wealthier parts of northern Italy. So I kind of wanted to go against the grain. I wanted to do something in central southern Italy. That's where my family came from. So many Italian Americans can trace their roots back to southern Italy. So I really wanted to invest in a team that I felt could represent the immigrant journey and the Italian American experience in a way that a lot of other clubs in the north couldn't. So we spent about a year. We looked at 20 different clubs that were basically in central and southern Italy and within a certain radius, and then we wound up narrowing that list from 20 to 8, and then from 8, I spoke to each one of the owners to see who was and wasn't open to foreign investment. And then we narrowed it down from 8 to 3. And then ultimately, we spent a lot of time in Italy studying the history, the traditions, meeting with the ownership groups, speaking to the fans. I mean, it was a pretty exhaustive process. And ultimately, that brought us to Campobasso. And we're super proud to be part of it. But that was, that wasn't like just happened on a whim or overnight. It was a pretty diligent and rigorous process that we implemented before we invested.
Absolutely. How long would you say the due diligence process was?
Well,
That
the whole process from start to finish was about a year. We had narrowed, it took about 6 months or so, I would say, to narrow it from our initial list of 20 or so clubs to our final list of 3. And then we spent, we spent 3 to 6 months traveling to Italy, meeting with the ownership groups, negotiating terms, doing proper financial and and legal due diligence, and then ultimately we wound up consummating the deal. So the whole process was about a year long or so.
understood. And then how big is your team? Is it just you're digging into all this, or do you have other people that you're outsourcing as well, or people within your organization that's helping you with the market research and that's a part of all these conversations that you're having and the traveling back and forth?
Back when we did the first deal in Italy,
Yeah.
well, back then I was fortunate because I had built a marketing business, and I was able, and the marketing business had achieved a considerable amount of scale for our industry. So I was fortunate where I was able to leverage a lot of the resources we had in the marketing firm to help me along the process of identifying and then ultimately buying the soccer team in Campobasso. So, like I had finance in-house, I had sales in-house, I had human resources in-house, we had legal at the time, it wasn't in-house, now it's in-house, but the legal back then, we had a relationship with an outsourced firm. So I was able to leverage all of those resources to help me, not just through the due diligence process, but also through the operating process. Once we bought the club, you need to promote the club, so you need a marketing agency and you need PR, and you need somebody to handle your bookkeeping and all of those, and sales, selling sponsors and all that sort of stuff. So I was really lucky because all of those resources were basically in house at my agency, so I was able to leverage a lot of them. Funny thing is, a lot of those resources, the employees and my coworkers who were working for me at the agency, they didn't necessarily sign up to get in the soccer business, but they were all kind of used to me and my crazy ways for the past 10 years. A lot of them worked with me a long time. So they were like, look, if Matt's doing it, we'll just go along for the ride. And they learned they got a crash course in what it takes to buy and then ultimately operate a soccer team. So they might not have realized it at the time, but they were gaining a lot of experience.
That's amazing. I mean, marketing's a huge aspect of soccer, promoting soccer, and creating awareness for fans to get behind a brand, behind a club, and essentially, I mean, the goal is for them to bleed for the club, right? I've heard Chelsea's fans say they're bleeding blue, or Man United fans say they're bleeding red. So, I mean, that's amazing. So, Italy was the first investment, and then can you just take us through the journey of each club that was after that?
Sure. So Kareem, we did the Italian deal first with Campobasso. The club had actually just been relegated all the way down to the 5th tier, which is at the highest level of amateur football, but it's amateur. It's an amateur league. It's not a professional league. And we had about 10 days to put the team together. Miraculously, we put the team together and wound up winning the league and getting promoted in our first season. And then our second season, we wound up getting promoted again. I think we were the first foreign ownership group ever to invest in Italian football and get 2 consecutive promotions, I believe, if not the first, one of the first. So that was kind of this amazing Cinderella story. We were doing it in parallel as Ryan Reynolds, and Rob McElhenney were doing their thing in Wrexham. So we were sort of building this identity as the Wrexham of Italy. And that turned into this beautiful sort of rags to riches, Cinderella, underdog type story. And as that was happening, we really were able to build a network of a global network of people inside and outside of football. So you meet, other owners, you meet other commissioners of leagues, you meet sponsors, you meet, players and agents. And we had really done a pretty good job building this network that 2 years ago, prior to my first investment in Italian football, I had no network in the football world. So that started to change. And then, you start to hear whispers and, you're looking at things like the US had just secured the rights to the World Cup. There were some whispers about Messi potentially coming to the United States, which obviously then a year or so later turned out to be true. So we were looking at sort of our chessboard at that time and saying, what's our next strategic move going to be as we build the portfolio? And that's when we decided to bet on U.S. soccer. We really felt like the next 5 to 10 years was going to be the golden age for soccer in the United States. You started to see franchise, values and valuations of these clubs, expansion fees, going through the roof. NWSL and MLS and USL and all of these leagues had really started to gain incredible enterprise value and momentum. So we really kind of we're making a bet on the US and not just any market in the US, but we studied the market and we felt like Brooklyn could really be a transformational market for professional football in the United States for all the reasons I'm sure you can think of, just given the multicultural nature of Brooklyn, the name brand recognition that Brooklyn has across the world. We just felt like Brooklyn could be an incredible professional football brand. And then we spent about 2 or 3 years trying to bring pro football to Brooklyn. It was not an easy experience. Obviously, it was, it's challenging. You have to find the right league to play in, negotiate your expansion agreements and franchise fees. You have to find facilities and a place to play. I mean, it was, dealing with the city of New York, of course, on top of it. And then you're dealing with the city of New York and Brooklyn in particular, which is just a super complicated market. So from kind of the inception of having that vision to bringing it to life, it took about 2 or 3 years, but that was obviously a big project, super ambitious project. And we were really kind of excited to get that, to bring that vision to life. And then from there, we wound up going to London. London was another place we had identified. London is the mecca of football across the world. And it's so hard to get any club in London. It's just hard to do deals in London. It's just so difficult for so many reasons. And then finally, earlier last year, we came across Dagenham and Redbridge, Daggers. Peter Freund was the owner at the time, and we had developed a great rapport with him. And he was sort of looking for the next to hand the club off to the next, generation. And he was really impressed with our experience as operators in Italy and what we were doing in Brooklyn. So we wound up acquiring the controlling stake of Daggers, and now this is our first year is in the driver's seat as owners of Daggers, and that was the fourth club we added to the portfolio. But it all sort of happened organically. As things do, you sort of build a network and find ways into new markets that you previously didn't have exposure in, and one thing led to another, and one club now became 4 clubs. And then we added Diizza most recently. That's our most recent investment, which is a strategic investment because it's an apparel company. So it obviously services the teams in our portfolio and gives us, we feel, a competitive edge over a lot of other MCOs, multi-club ownership groups. So we're really excited about that one too. But look, a lot of these things, just like in anything in life or in your career, they just happen by timing and circumstances and finding your way into seeing market opportunities and networking and stuff like that. So we're thrilled to have these assets in the portfolio now, and we're continuing to look to build from here.
Very cool. I know I've had Diego on the podcast before you guys invested in their company, so that's pretty cool. It was pretty cool to see. And then I've seen Brooklyn, I've seen the club in Italy. So are all clubs that you guys have right now in Diizza Apparel?
Yeah, well, right now, all of them except for Daggers, because Daggers had sort of a legacy deal, but that's obviously the intent and the vision is to consolidate everything under Diizza. Diego Hurtado, you mentioned, he's built a great company. He's a great entrepreneur. We're really bullish on that. Also, beyond the opportunity to scale Diizza, it's also very strategic because it gives us so much more flexibility. If one of our clubs, if Campobasso wants to do a special edition kit, which we'll actually be doing with one of our main sponsors, Liquid Death, in the next couple months here, we can turn those things around, on 24 hours notice. In Brooklyn, Brooklyn FC, we were doing breast cancer awareness month, so we needed special kits, with pink numbers and letters. We'll do vintage hoodies, we'll do stuff like that. And if we were working with with another provider, that stuff just takes a long time. You have to go through the approval process. The supply chain is, much slower and more complicated. When you have that brand in-house that you own, you can just be much more nimble and flexible and be able to turn those custom ideas around quickly. And when you're working with somebody like me, Kareem, my mind is kind of always racing and running with all kinds of new crazy ideas and creative initiatives we want to implement. So having a partner like Diizza and Diego by our side to kind of run with those ideas and bring them from ideation to to prime time is an incredible advantage.
100%. And Diego's super cool. I mean, the work when I had spoke to him, he just finished up the event with Ronaldinho, which was
Yeah.
pretty cool. That with a legend Ronaldinho. So wow. And then you see Ronaldinho investing into USL One with Triumph, Greenville Triumph. So it's like US soccer is picking up, and I kind of want to track back to Italy a little bit because well, for you, and then I want to tap back and then go back to the US. But for you, in regards to what was the intention and the motivation to invest into Italy? What did you see, and especially from your position as the storyline as an underdog story, rags to riches? What opportunity did you see investing into Italy, and what year was that? And then obviously there's the benefits of promotion relegation, but besides that and player transfers, was there any other opportunity that you seen in Italy and that made you pull the trigger to go in?
Well, look, from a business standpoint, it's all about scarcity. So I think we saw an opportunity to pick up an asset that might have been a little distressed, mismanaged, for one reason or another. Because of promotion and relegation, a lot of the levels really are just a moment in time. Some teams are in Serie A or Serie B, but they're, realistically, that they're only 2 or 3 years away from sliding down on the pyramid because it's just a moment in time. And the true is, and the same is true in the opposite direction, where there's teams that might be in the third, fourth, or fifth tiers, but that they have all of the, the opportunities to be in the higher tiers. And Campobasso was one of them. So I was really enamored with the idea of buying a club that had fallen just, to a lower tier, but it was really just a moment in time. They had all of the resources to really grow into becoming a much larger team and higher in the pyramid. And as you go up in the pyramid, obviously the clubs gain considerable value. There was a 25,000 seat stadium. There's about 300,000 people that live in Molise, which is the region where Campobasso is located in Italy. But there's about 1.2 million people from that region who live in the United States and in Canada. So in terms of our business model and our operating skills and our resources, which were so much heavily concentrated on sales and marketing in the US and Canada, we felt like that was a great opportunity to really build market share and grow a fan base here. So that was kind of the business argument. But beyond the business argument, it just spoke to me, I think, on a personal level in a way that a lot of the other clubs in Italy didn't. Campobasso is in this beautiful but undiscovered part of Italy. It's sort of nestled between Rome and Naples. It doesn't get the credit it really deserves. It sort of lives in the shadows of these more popular touristy destinations to the north and to the south. And they actually say in Italy, they say Molise non esiste, which means Molise, which is the region, doesn't exist. Even Italians sometimes don't realize that this region of Italy exists. And that really spoke to me. It was like this, and it was around COVID when there was just so much bad news happening. So much of the news cycle was negative. I just felt like we could buy this club and really turn it into this beautiful sort of underdog, rags to riches, Cinderella type story. And that's exactly what it's been. The opportunity to bring hope and identity and life to this region of Italy that really got overlooked oftentimes, was something that was super motivating. And we've built it into a great club. 2 years or 3 years later, we've had 2 promotions. We're now rubbing shoulders with some of the biggest clubs in Italy. Mark, Consuelos, Kelly Ripa became co-owners of ours. They brought just a totally different level of notoriety and visibility to the club here in North America. So we're really blessed to have them by our side. And it's been like, I'm living my dream. I wake up every day, get out of bed, love what I do. I mean, how many people can say that? So that's something that I'm really, really proud of and really honored to be a part of.
100%. I'm definitely truly inspired, and everything that you're doing, I'm working towards. So oh my God, you're an inspiration to me. I'm not going to cut that out. I'll keep that in. With saying that, um, what would you say are some? I have two more questions on the Italian side. What would you say were the key ingredients to turning that club around and making it a success and the club getting promoted?
Well, in the case of Campobasso, Kareem, they just, number one, they needed better management processes. It was just, it was mismanaged and it was a little distressed, and the organization of the club just was not structured properly. So, the finance department, the scouting department, it was interesting because my experience was building marketing and media businesses and agencies. And what I found was that it wasn't too different from building a soccer team. A lot of the same rules that applied to my original business really were no different when it came to Campobasso. It was about building culture, building camaraderie, putting an infrastructure in place, and then getting department heads to work together. So the head of finance needs to be pushing and pulling in the same direction as the head of scouting. Your coaching staff needs to be pulling in the same direction as your head of marketing. And so it was really just about putting an organizational discipline and infrastructure in place that didn't exist previously. So that was number one. And then I would say the number two thing was communicating with the fans. Like, the fans were deflated and they were very cynical. They had just been relegated down two tiers. They were in the third tier, got relegated all the way to the fifth tier in the span of like 12 or 18 months. And here these American guys are coming in and taking over the club, and what are their real intentions, and what are their motives, and what's their hidden agenda here. So a lot of it was just winning the fans over by communicating openly, transparently, and showing them that, I joke around a lot, but it's the truth. We're an ambitious group. I am an ambitious president for Campobasso. We have very big ambitions and hopes and dreams. So sometimes my hardest job is just to show these people that they can dream to achieve goals that are bigger than they ever believed they could achieve, right? And that to me is a daily. We've obviously gotten better in time. We've won two championships in 2 years. So obviously the confidence that the fans have in us is quite high certainly compared to where it was a few years ago. But I'm kind of constantly on this quest and on this journey to help these people in Italy dream in ways I think they never believed they could dream before. And to me, that's been the coolest part of the project. Like, when, it's reciprocal. It's our group building something special for the fans, but it's the fans also helping us in exchange. And it's really been a two-way street. And that's been the coolest thing. It's taught me the importance of building, it's taught me the importance of having a fan base and an ownership group that really is on the same page and is pulling in the same direction. And it's really been a dream come true in that regard.
Where does that power within inside you to inspire others to think bigger and dream bigger come from?
I think a lot of that, Kareem, comes from, look, my background. I mean, you have to realize, like so many other Americans, millions of Americans, come from first, second generation immigrant families. My grandparents immigrated here from Italy. My parents, to give my parents an opportunity to do something great with their lives. Both of my parents are first generation, college educated. My mother worked in a school district in Mount Vernon, New York, just north of New York City for 40 years, without air conditioning, and, made a lot of sacrifices for me, as did my father. My grandfather came here in very difficult conditions and worked in the sweatshops of the garment district and, in New York City for so. And I think that really inspires you to dream. I always felt an incredible responsibility to achieve big things and to try to do things with my life and my career that maybe they were not able to do, not because they weren't smart enough. In fact, the opposite. I think they were much smarter than me, but they just didn't have the resources I had. I felt like I had no excuses. I have all these resources around me that they never had. I had really no excuse, to go out and give it my all and to try to achieve big things. And I've always been someone that when I do something, I usually put 110% of my heart and soul into it. And it doesn't always succeed. And you kind of go into it knowing that you're risking it all. But if you fail, you gave it your all. And, I always felt like I could live with myself if I tried and failed, but I could never live with myself if I didn't try at all. So I think a lot of it comes back to just kind of my upbringing, my family, and, just the responsibility I think you have as somebody who has a level of resources that your parents, your grandparents, the prior generations didn't have.
For sure. On In regards to the real estate side of investment, I mean, I'm pretty familiar with the lay of the ground. I'm pretty familiar with the grounds of USL and the investment opportunity for mixed-use development projects, stadium, hotel, commercial, hospitality, residential, etc. So, in regards to Europe now, is that same opportunity? Is there that same opportunity in Italy and England, or is it a bit different?
So obviously the structures are quite different, but we were really lucky when we went in to do the Italian deal with Campobasso, Kareem. One of the things we did, which I'm very thankful for, for having really good lawyers and accountants and people around me, because I would have never thought of it, but we actually negotiated with the city of Campobasso an option to buy the stadium. So the thinking was, let us bet on ourselves. Let's build a great project. I mean, you have to remember when we first bought Campobasso, it was in the 5th tier. The fans were totally demoralized. We had like 300 fans show up at our first game. And then 2 years later, when we wound up winning our second promotion, on the bus ride back after we clinched our second promotion, we had 30,000 fans waiting for us at the stadium. So just think about how far we came in a relatively short period of time. It was done in 2 years or less than 2 years. So we were like, look, let's bet on ourselves. And then this stadium, which was basically left abandoned, this stadium is going to be worth something, and we're going to pack this place, and 25,000 seats are going to be filled, and it's going to be rocking. So we wound up negotiating with the city of Campobasso an option to buy the stadium back at very favorable terms. And now 2 years later, we're in a big league. We need we need more infrastructure. Our stadium, we're lucky to have the foundation built, and now we're in a position where we could exercise this option and really go invest in building a world-class privately owned stadium in Italy. So we're excited about that.
Amazing. So now, from your experience in Italy, the second investment was Brooklyn FC, right?
Correct.
Brooklyn FC. So now you're going in with a more experience, a football or soccer network, the US, where you're currently from in New York. How many markets did you look at before you landed on New York, Brooklyn,
We
or
looked at a few.
Brooklyn, New York?
We looked at a few, we looked at a few, Kareem, but our our heart was set on Brooklyn, and our vision was really, we were betting on Brooklyn as a standalone market. I mean, the Brooklyn name just carries so much weight across the world. The one thing I've noticed too, Kareem, about Brooklyn is people genuinely want to see this project succeed because they want to see Brooklyn succeed. Brooklyn sort of represents a set of values that I think everybody can identify with, and everyone sort of has a soft spot for Brooklyn and roots for Brooklyn. Brooklyn is the quintessential underdog. So we looked at a few other markets, but we were really dead set on Brooklyn. We just felt like Brooklyn could be such a special brand and special franchise and such a special place to do pro football, pro soccer in the United States, and not just do it in any way. We wanted to do it in a very inclusive way where we were the first, I believe, the first professional soccer franchise in the US to have both a men's team and a women's team under the same brand, under the same umbrella. We have Brooklyn Football Club men and Brooklyn Football Club women. Our women are actually in first place in the Super League, so we're super excited about that. But that was a big part of the vision too, was just to create a family. This is whether you're playing for the Brooklyn FC men's team or women's team or the youth academy, you're in the Brooklyn FC family. One name, one badge, and that's been a big part of our operating strategy from day one.
Understood. Is the real estate play a part of this project?
Absolutely. I mean, look, my dream, talk about dreaming big. My dream is to, and I know I speak for our entire group. Our group's goal and ambition is to have a soccer specific stadium. Imagine that in the borough of Brooklyn, where people can call home and, you come out there on a Friday night and you see our women play. You come out on a Saturday night, you see our men play. Sunday, there's community events and tournaments and our youth academy playing. I mean, that's our vision long term. Obviously, you need to sort of take baby steps to get there. So the first step was making sure we at least had a professional world-class stadium to play in. The New York Mets organization, the Brooklyn Cyclones, were very gracious, and they worked collaboratively with us, and we now have a lease to play out in Coney Island at their stadium in Maimonides Park in Coney Island. So at least we know for the next several years, we have a place to call home, and then we're going to still continue to be as acquisitive and ambitious as possible about real estate, and we're not, giving up on that dream. The government officials and the political, the politicians in Brooklyn and in New York City have been incredibly supportive of us. We've already had dialogue with them. It's been very positive, very constructive. But obviously, you're talking about New York City, which is not an easy place to get things built, and real estate developments. There's a layer of complications, and that just doesn't necessarily apply to many other cities across the U.S. So we're trying to be very methodical about it, but we're also not giving up on this dream, and we think long term we're going to be able to make it happen by hook or by crook.
Got it. Um, with saying that, when did you guys buy into USL, and how long? What was the timeline until kickoff? How long did everything take?
Well, I can tell you, God, it's the years kind of blur now. Back when you're younger, it's like the it's like the months and the weeks blur. Now, when you get older, the years start to blur. But we started to craft this vision for doing professional soccer, bringing professional soccer to Brooklyn. I would say in late 2020, early 2021. It was about our first season in Campobasso. And then we started speaking to leagues and understanding what our options were, and meeting with New York City government officials to see if we could get their support. And the odyssey sort of began, I would say, in early 2021, and then I believe we consummated the deal in the summer of 2023 with the USL, and then we bought the originally it was USL 1 for a men's franchise, and then we wound up doing USL Super League for our women's franchise, and then we moved our men's franchise to Championship. So all of that happened in earlier this year, early 2024. I believe we signed our franchise agreement for the women's team sometime around February or March, and then it was like get to work immediately because it's the first season, and we were reporting to training camp like 4 months later. So we went from having no team, no women team at all, to having everything in place basically in the span of 4 or 5 months.
Got it. Did you guys do all the onboarding for staff, or was USL, uh, do they have a department to support with that?
Well, the USL has been very generous with their resources and time, and obviously they have a great network. And whenever we need to tap into their resources or need a recommendation or a second opinion, they're always one phone call away, and they've been awesome to us. But they've also kind of given us the space and the distance that we felt we needed to operate the club. We obviously have a great network globally that we built over the past several years of owning soccer clubs across the world. And then we're New Yorkers. I'm a New Yorker. All three of my daughters, Viviana, Valentina, Simona, they were all born in Brooklyn. So, we have a network locally, and we were able to sort of leverage both of those things, Kareem, to build a great staff. Obviously, we had to do it on short notice, and we're still very much building it. The staff is continuing to be built out, but the first couple months we were really leveraging our network, and then putting a phone call into the US just to get a second opinion or a second set of eyes when we needed to.
Understood. In regards to financials, the P&L, how because from my research, owning the stadium is one of the keys to the success of the P&L. Also being able to control the scheduling for games. So how did you guys structure the P&L? Because most clubs, or not, let me not say most clubs, but how long are you guys looking until you guys get in the green with a P&L without having a stadium currently? Obviously, that's in the works, but how did you guys structure the P&L? And then are you guys putting majority of the capital in, or did you guys also raise capital to invest into this project?
Well, look, the first question, when we always try to run these clubs, you have to have a long-term vision, when you're looking at football clubs. I mean, if you think you're just going to be able to buy a club, run it incredibly profitably, and flip it, in the span of 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, even 2 years, it's just not realistic. So you really have to have a generational view on these clubs, particularly in the United States, because you're entering the golden, you're betting on US soccer in the next 5 to 10 to 15 years, really entering the golden age, right? So everyone is jockeying for the right asset in US soccer, as US soccer continues to grow. And when we look at the P&L, we also try to think about how can we bring incremental revenue sources that don't exist when we buy the club. So, like, I'll give you an example. When we look at the Italian club Campobasso, the P&L was a very traditional European football P&L. So your revenue sources were, stadium, match day revenue, from ticket sales and concessions and whatnot, from player development, and then maybe a little bit of media rights, right? So we were looking at that club saying, okay, like this is sort of our core. These are our core sources of revenue. Obviously, how can we optimize those and bring and improve those? But then how can we bring new streams of revenue to the table that this club wasn't even, thinking of in their wildest imagination, right? So in our case, what we did was we started to lean into U.S. sponsors, which was a market that was totally under tapped, untapped. They hadn't even explored the U.S. market because they didn't have the connections. So we started getting sponsors in the U.S. We started to really pump up our merchandising strategy. So we started to generate revenue and all of a sudden, before we knew it, this club, which was losing money, got to break even, in relatively short period of time or close to break even. And that was because I think we did a pretty good job of resetting and reimagining how we could generate revenue for this club in ways that the previous ownership group wasn't even thinking of. And I think Brooklyn is really no different. Like when we think about the Brooklyn project, to your point, real estate, owning the stadium and having the opportunity to optimize your revenue sources into the stadium and leaning on other experiences and tournaments and concerts and all that stuff is super important. But being in Brooklyn, we knew that we weren't going to have a stadium we could call our own for, a few years. So we tried to exploit other revenue sources that other American soccer franchises might not be thinking about. So like we did a pretty good job of trying to monetize content, custom content. And, we're talking about potentially building a docu-series that would be sponsored, stuff like that. The Brooklyn merchandise brand, I mean, that could be a line of business to it, in itself. That could be, a several $1 million line of business as we get it going. So that's something that's really interesting to us. One reason we chose the USL over MLS was because we felt the USL, from a player development and player trading standpoint, was a lot more advanced, frankly. It gave us the opportunity to develop players, sell players, and then ultimately, receive the proceeds from those players in a way that maybe some of the other leagues didn't necessarily allow us to. So there, you just have to sort of reimagine your P&L and say, look, instead of these 1, 2, 3 core revenue channels, how do we turn 3 core revenue channels into 6 or 7? And there's other ways to look at this club as a platform to generate revenue beyond just the sporting side.
Yep. I'm so glad that you had shared that point in regards to the league, why you chose USL, because I totally forgot to ask that one, but I really appreciate you sharing that. Um, Player transfers, I was thinking small. I was focusing on each club. I forgot that this was an MCO model, multi-club ownership, and that opens up doors for player transfers. So I forgot about that. So thank you for reminding me of that, player transfers. And the Docu-Series is an amazing opportunity. I mean, because we've seen what Wrexham has been able to do with theirs. I mean, obviously they have huge star power, but New York has so much star power that you guys could tap into if you wanted to. And then obviously soccer on its own is huge with content. Obviously football content around the world's picking up. Content in the US is starting to pick up as well, especially as Messi, 2026 World Cup coming up, and the Olympics, all these different events, FIFA Club World Cup.
Yep.
So as you mentioned, a gold mine coming up. And I just wanted to share a little bit of my perspective, because we've been looking into this too in regards to the reality TV show aspect. Opens up doors globally for fans worldwide. Gives it, I mean, if done correctly, placed on the right platform, gives fans worldwide an opportunity to become fans. It's the global sponsorship opportunity, increase in merchandise. So I mean, again, what you said, Brooklyn, that's culture. Brooklyn's known worldwide. So I mean, it's such a great market. What's the city population size in that MSA?
Brooklyn is just under 3 million, I believe, which
Wow.
I think, because obviously Brooklyn is one of the 5 boroughs, so it's part of the city of New York. But if Brooklyn was a standalone city, I believe it would be the 3rd largest city, I believe, in the United States. So, and then not to mention, you go anywhere, I don't know, Kareem, if you've traveled recently to Europe or, but every time I'm in Europe, I have a game now. I keep a tally of every time I see a Brooklyn branded, hat or sweatshirt or t-shirt. And, I'm like in the hundreds every time I go now. You see hundreds and hundreds of people just, if you're in Rome or you're in Paris or you're in London, you see so many people just wearing t-shirts or hoodies or hats that just say the word Brooklyn on it. Brooklyn really is a global brand, I think, in a way that maybe no other city in the world is. Even New York City, I think Brooklyn probably carries at this point more name brand recognition across the world than New York itself.
Understood. Yep. Why USL one and not championship? Because the population size is fit as the championship criteria.
Well, originally, when we obviously now we're in USL champion. We will be in USL championship when our men's team begins playing, and we're in USL Super League, which is a Division One sanctioned league on the women's side. When we first negotiated the franchise rights, we thought that there was and I think there still is a good opportunity for there to be promotion and relegation in USL. So we were so used to getting, to the promote to pro rel system in Europe, we were like, look, we'll just earn our way into the top league if the opportunity presents itself. So that's why we went with USL 1, originally thinking that down the road we'd have the opportunity to earn our way into USL Championship by being promoted there. And then obviously as time went on and we wound up negotiating for the Super League team, we felt like it was just more appropriate to begin our men's team in Championship, which is the highest tier of USL soccer. And we're really proud that we did that. I mean, we have Brooklyn Football Club men and women's team both competing at the highest levels available to us in the USL pyramid. So that should be exciting.
That's huge. And why not? Why USL Super League? Why? Yeah, USL Super League. Why not NWSL?
Well, we were really enamored with and had a lot of respect for the USL vision. The USL vision is, I think, very similar to what we were experiencing in Europe. They believe in a much more entrepreneurial vision. It's more free, free market. Sponsors, you can recruit your own sponsors, and if you close your own sponsors, you get the revenue. If you develop Kareem Rae, from the age of 12 years old, and he becomes, a superstar player, and he gets an opportunity to go play for PSG or for Man United, and you sell him off, you get 100% of the proceeds, because you developed him. So I think we really liked that model, and we were much more accustomed to operating clubs with a similar model in Europe. So I think that was a big thing. And then the other thing was, particularly with the Super League, I think is really built on giving access and opportunity to women and to female soccer players across the world. And that was, our scouting network was global. We have players that we know in South America and Central America and Africa and Eastern Europe and Asia. And I think that the Super League was very much, built on, hey, go out there and recruit, like go open up your global network and, bring these players in that might be under scouted, or they might not be getting an opportunity to play in, the other Super League in England or in the NWSL, because they might just not be on the radar of some of these GMs. But, like we have players on our team right now from Brazil. We have a former U20 national team player from Brazil who's lighting it up for us, Luana Grabias. We have the Puerto Rican national team goalkeeper Sydney Martinez. And then obviously we have a lot of players who came up through the American system and played D1 or might have played in the NWSL or whatnot. So our team has really kind of taken on the identity of Brooklyn, gritty, underdog, never got any favors, everything they got, they earned. And I think that really was the ethos of the Super League that really spoke to us.
Understood. Last question. The US and Europe are two completely different beasts. What's your perspective on the differences in regards to investment and management?
Well, look, I think the first thing I would say is in Europe with it's a meritocracy, sporting meritocracy, right? With promotion and relegation, you do well, you win your league, you get promoted, or if you're in the top tier, you qualify for European Cup competitions. And if you do poorly, you get relegated and you drop a tier. And your enterprise value, the valuation, right, is literally, directly proportionate to that. If you go up, you make money. If you go down, you lose money. It's a pretty simple formula. So I think in Europe, you're so laser focused on the product being the sporting side, the soccer, the football. So I think most of our energy and time and resources. I mean, we're like obsessive on getting the soccer right with our European clubs because we have to be. If you don't get the soccer right, nothing else works. In the US, obviously, we're also obsessive about the soccer, but it's a little bit more flexible here because if you finish in last place, you're not getting relegated. You know what I mean? So you can sort of take a little bit more time to think about all of the things out off the pitch. You know, the media, the marketing, the branding, the sales, the merchandising, all of that stuff. Not that it's not important in Europe because it is, but I think just the US system affords you the opportunity maybe to spend a little bit more or allocate more of your time and resources on making sure you perfect that, because the onus isn't necessarily always on, hey, if I don't win the league, my whole project crashes and burns. You know, you can afford to, you know, look at what even in other US sports, look at what like the Philadelphia 76ers did in the NBA. I mean, they basically tanked, you know, 2 or 3 seasons so they could stockpile draft picks and ultimately build a team that was super competitive for the future. We just would never be able to do that in Europe because if we did that in Europe, we would be relegated 2 or 3 times and we'd be right back in the amateur ranks and our fans would be throwing rocks and tomatoes and, you know, pizza boxes, you know, or, you know, at our face. And that's something. So I guess in a, you know, in a certain way, you want to just take advantage of the benefits that each system has to offer to you. So the benefits of the European system is that there's an incessant focus on the sporting side, and in the US, there's an incessant focus on the business side. And I think, you know, you just really need to make sure that you're allocating most of your time and resources, or the majority of your time and resources, to the structure of each system.
Understood. If you don't mind, I'll actually make this the last question. I've never interviewed anyone in the MCO model, so it'd be really good to get your perspective on MCO, multi-club ownership. Is it good? Are you enjoying multi-club ownership or not?
Well, look, Kareem, we're having the time of our lives. I mean, I could tell you myself on a very selfish, personal level, you know, being a generation or two removed from, you know, my grandfather coming here and making all the sacrifices he made. I mean, to be 2 generations removed from that and to be waking up every day and living in soccer and owning soccer teams. I mean, who am I to complain? I have nothing to complain about, you know? So yes, I'm having the time of my life. It certainly is not without its own challenges and obstacles and adversity, you know, just like any other business. But yeah, I'm having the time of my life. I think the important thing with these MCOs in terms of are they good or are they not good, I think the MCOs need to be of, you know, need to provide a service that's of value to the global soccer ecosystem. So in our case, like we do underdogs. That's our thing. We focus on these underdog projects, Brooklyn, Campobasso, Daggers, you know, distressed assets. They might be a league or two below where they should be because of just, you know, some unfortunate set of circumstances or mismanagement that might have happened over the past, but they have tons of upside potential. So we really do feel like we're lending a service that's of value, you know, taking these underdog teams, bringing them up in tiers, putting them on the map, building brands, building fan bases, you know, bringing the level of hope and identity to regions across the world that might have been underserviced or might not have necessarily had a global identity. You know, we feel like we're positive agents of change and custodians for these communities and these clubs. So I think that is something that we're really proud of. I would say my overall advice, you know, we talk to a lot of business people and entrepreneurs who are trying to go into the MCO business and acquire multiple clubs. My advice is always the same. It's just formulate a thesis, a business plan, and stick to it. Like stick to it. So our thing is we do underdogs. Like, you know, you go to KFC and you know you're just getting chicken at KFC. Like you come to Club Underdog, you just get underdogs. That's all we do. Like, so as tempting as some deals can be, and believe me, Kareem, like they can be tempting. If they don't speak to us and check our boxes for our thesis, they just don't make sense for us to do. Even though to the outside world, they might be like, oh, well, why didn't you do that deal in Paris? Or why didn't you do that deal in Tokyo? Or why didn't you do that deal in Melbourne? To the outside world, the deal might have made sense, but in the construct of the MCO model that we're building, where we focus on underdogs, some of those deals might not make sense. So I would say formulate a thesis, formulate a business plan, a vision, and be very rigorous and disciplined about making sure you stick to that. And if it checks the boxes and it fits the business model, look into the deal. Don't necessarily do the deal because then you got to do diligence, and there's a lot of stuff that could come up in diligence that that could scare you away, but at least it's worth looking into. If it doesn't check the boxes, then it's dead on arrival. Don't even look into it.
Absolutely. Well, Matt, I look forward to learning more from you, continuing to build our relationship, and I'll plant a seed now. I think one Soccer Nation may fit in that portfolio. Our goal is to give unknown superstars a chance to go pro. So we have an underdog story, a rags to riches, that I'd like to share more with you later on. But for
Kareem,
now,
talk to my deal guy. We should talk.
let's do it. Yeah. But for now, Matt, I again really appreciate you taking the time for being on the One Soccer Nation podcast.
You too. Appreciate the time, Kareem. Keep up the great work. You're doing great things.
Thank you.